show you a quick and easy way to lower your C8 Z06 and honestly your C8 Stingray. They're both the same. They both take the exact same spanners. So if you can't find spanners for Z06, just go ahead and buy the Stingray ones. I'm in the middle of track prepping my Z06, and while you don't really need to lower the car for track prep, obviously, when I'm in here doing the brake fluid, I just went ahead and decided to lower the vehicle as well. So some of the tools you're gonna need, again, is gonna be the spanners from a Stingray. It's totally fine. I wrapped the handles in gaffer tape. And the why I did that is because I don't want the handle to accidentally hit the carbon ceramic rotors and potentially chip them or something like that. You don't really need to be that aggressive with this in general, but obviously this is a little bit of insurance. The Sharpie I use to mark the location just center to the ball joint here. Again, it doesn't need to be an exact science. It just semi-center here. I even do it from the underside a little bit here on the back because when you have a spanner on it, it gives you a nice point of reference when you're kind of looking from the bottom of it. And then I'll show you what I do with the Sharpie after this, but this just helps keep track of how many rotations you've had so far. And I have a little bit of a safety barrier to show you on that one. The screwdrivers, these are really for prying down the dust boot for the threads. I've seen some people just grab them and pull them down, and if you can do that, great. If not, you'll just need to do this once, and after that it'll be loose enough, it won't be that big of a deal. And then a medium blade screwdriver, then we're going to use that to push the boot back on, and then a little bit of my gaffer's tape to re-secure the boot. So from the factory, they put a little bit of electrical tape here. The electrical tape just comes right off. This just keeps the boot from spinning around or dropping down. And then we're going to use, again, electrical tape as a way to re-secure it back in. So once you get the screwdriver, you're just going to turn it on its side here. And like that, again, it's just a small blade screwdriver. You can just pull down a little bit on this plastic collar and turn it. And what it'll do is it'll just basically just push itself off, and you're going to use your other hand to hold the screwdriver to hold it parallel to the shock with the head of the flathead, and then this will just help pop it down. This is a really soft metal here, but again, this is just designed to hold this collar. So when you have this in here and you kind of get this in here and you turn it, it sits in there kind of nice when you have a small flat blade screwdriver. So then when you're twisting that around, it's helping push down the plastic and just drops down at the bottom here. Once you get this done once, if you ever need to service the shock again, it's pretty easy to do. You don't have to go through all this as much. It'll be a little bit looser, but just from the factory, it's definitely stiff. Next, I'm going to basically write how many rotations I plan to use. So if I ever come back in, it's here in Sharpie. I know how many rotations there was. So I'm going to be 11 full turns down from stock. And then once that's covered up, you won't see that. But basically, what I'm going to do here is I'm going to break this collar and then drop this down basically to the 11 mark here. And then I'm going to put tape around the bottom of this collar to the shock, because this collar here will actually spin when you've got force on it, at least for the first couple rotations of the upper shock mount here. So what we want to do is we want to get this down, and then we'll run some tape again underneath it and to the shock body. And then for the first probably 2 rotations, you're going to hold the bottom of the collar with the tape to keep it from the whole thing from spinning. And then once you get those 2 rotations done, you can pretty much stop and then just use your other hand to guide the spanner across to make it quicker on dropping this down. But it's not that difficult, but you're just going to need a little bit of force just to break this loose. Remember, you're going to want to go spin this one right so it's threading down, right? Because if you're threading up, you'll be going up, and then you'll just want to be holding the top one, or you can kind of, basically pull them at each other to break them loose. But they're not in there that stiff, especially on the cars new like this. So don't worry about taking a bunch of force. It's really easy to do. So sorry, I got that backwards. In the last cut, I said you need to basically turn them towards each other, but you're actually going to pull them away. So this spanner's going to go here, and you're going to kind of hold it here, and then you're going to have the one that you're going to pull it to the left there to get the lower collar there to rotate right. Since I've got one hand, it's going to go down like this, and then you're going to hold that one again. You know, you're going to hold like that. But then all we're going to do here is we're just going to count. You know, I popped this loose, but you know that was obviously lined up here, so we're going to just count 11 rotations down here. Eight, 9, 10, 11. Now I'm going to put some tape here. It's going to sit right underneath the bottom of this collar. It'll help hold the collar from just rotating around when you're in here moving, because since this, you know, doesn't take much force to move it around, and again holds this collar to the shock itself. So just for reference, I'll post obviously the video at the end of how it looks, but basically I'm going down 9 turns in the front, and then down 11 turns in the rear. The Z06 sits a little bit higher in the rear, so bringing it down to slightly 9/11 is easy to remember, obviously, as far as the lowering goes. Basically the 0.8 inches that you can go on this would be 13.33 turns, to be scientific with it. So we're kind of a little bit up from the full 0.8 inches in the rear. I think it was like 0.65 inches off the top of my head, and then the front is like a ½ inch. So let's go ahead and tape it up. So here we are taped up. It's right up against the bottom of this collar, so it doesn't move as easily now. Obviously it can still rotate, but obviously I know where center is here if it were to move a little bit. And basically I'm a lefty, but I'm gonna hold the bottom of the shock here, and then I'm going to turn this guy down to probably where I get about 2 full turns down, and then it should be enough tension preload off of the spring that I can continue to turn this down until I get it down here without having to hold the bottom collar. So I'm gonna go ahead and ratchet this down. All right, so this is down 11 turns. You can see here's my mark. I obviously verified that it's right in a line here to my 11 mark. You know, this is, again, a whole rotation's 0.06 inches. It's not like this has to be some sort of scientific adventure here. You know, if you want to as well, to verify on each side, you can measure the amount of threads that you see exposed, give you a good point of reference left or right. But if you're off a quarter turn or half a turn, you're not going to notice. You know, the main point of these adjustments is for corner weighting, and while I will corner weight the vehicle later, right now I'm just lowering it just so I can get it ready for an alignment, and then I can check it out later. Also worth noting, since the Z06 only needs 2 degrees, or you know, calls for 2 degrees of camber in the front and rear, unlike the Stingray where you're at -3 in the front, -2.5 in the rear, you don't actually have to swap the washers to the front side of the bolts like you would to get ready for a track alignment on the Stingray. So that's a nice thing. I'm going to actually go up to about probably 2.2 degrees of negative camber. I have found that when I had my Stingray, I was in the -3.6-ish range for camber in the front to get even tire wear, and then about 2.8 in the rear. And that, you know, it all depends on the driving style and where your camber is going to end up, but I definitely needed about a ½ degree more in the front, and about 3/10 of a degree more in the rear to get the tires wearing how I want it to. But I'm going to go ahead and tighten this back up here. So sandwich these together. This should pretty much line up pretty close to the center here once this is all locked back up. Again, point of reference. And then I'm going to slide the collar back up, and I'm going to put some gaffer tape here instead of the electrical tape to hold the collar from moving. Also worth noting, you know, if the car's got a lot of dirty threads, you could get some carb cleaner or you know, W40 or anything like that as far as cleaning the threads out. But didn't really need to do it here on mine because it's only got about 1,500 miles on it. I normally keep the tape on the bottom, but I wanted to illustrate the number 11 here and the alignment here. So when I tighten this up, it actually rotated the collar just slightly, but it's tight. It's just that this is just moved over, you know, 1/8 of an inch here. It's not that big of a deal. I could loosen it back up and turn this back over and retighten it if I wanted it perfect. But you know, again, this is so minor of a difference between here and here. You're talking about like a 32nd of an inch, if that. But yeah, this is basically what you should see when you got it all done here. I like to do the underneath here too. So when you're rotating it with the spanner, you can see, you know, when the spanner's on top of the collar, you can see a mark here as it's rotating around the back of the shock. On the front, since it sits lower, it's not as needed, but I like doing it on the rear here. And also worth noting is when you get your spanner, what you want to do is you want to come in from the bottom here, because there's the metal shock mount. It has a little bit of a lip here. So if you try to come in from the top or something, you're going to catch that. You're going to be trying to spin this metal here. You want to kind of just suck up right underneath here, just like that, and then it's not underneath. It is underneath the metal collar here. But yeah, pretty easy. About 10 minutes per corner once you get the wheel off. So basically, I'm going to push up on the screwdriver, and then I'm going to push up with my hand on, as I'm feeding this in. You're just going to want to rotate this and just kind of push some force here on the bottom of the screwdriver as you're turning it. So here we are, all done. Gaffer tape's on here. Again, you can reuse electrical tape or use electrical tape. I just think the gaffer is just looks a little bit nicer to hold, a little bit better than electrical tape. And here it is all lined up. I also have a video here coming up on how to bleed your brakes using high temp brake fluid. Number one thing you should do if you're going to go and track your car.